Oh hi, Taryn here with Elegant Upgrades, and we're doing something a little bit different this week because such is life. I'm going to be painting smalls. I know it's not my typical furniture situation. However, this is my business and I have to do what keeps my business going. You guys are kind of just along for the ride. I mean, to be fair, I'm just along for the ride and seeing what happens. So, we're painting smalls today. Let's just see what happens. All right, so I'm just taking, these ones are Clorox wipes, it doesn't matter. I'm just getting everything cleaned. So especially like these little pewter frames, they aren't getting anything done to them with the exception of I will put in like a pretty print. So these ones in particular are napkins that I usually use to decoupage with. Sometimes I'll use wallpaper, whatever. I like to put that kind of stuff in the frames because they sell better. And then everything else is just getting a good clean, making sure that there's no oils or anything like that, dust, all that. So all the paint sticks, you know, as you do. All right, so I have everything cleaned and I've got my stuff separated out that is perfect and needs nothing done to it. And then another box full of things that need repairs done. And then kind of this is the layout of where I'm starting. Everything on this side is going to get a base coat of gray. I'm going to try out this Black Dog Salvage in the color Galvanized. I met one of their people. Her name was Tracy at the market, and she gave me the sample, was like, oh, you should try this. So I was like, oh, what a perfect opportunity to try on smalls. So I'm going to try this out on smalls. And then on the stuff over here, it's going to get a base coat of Goblin Gray, which is Chalk Mountain's like really deep teal color. It's one of my most favorite colors ever. I love it. So that stuff over here. And then I have kind of the foodie type stuff like the bread box and the rolling pins and breadboards and things. I'm not going to be painting those quite yet because I'm not sure where I'm going with them, but I have them here because they needed to get cleaned out. So anyways, base coat, everything is going to dry overnight. So we're going to start out with gray, start out with Goblin Gray over here, and then they'll have different finishes in the end, but the base coats will be on and set to dry. So I'm going to get that going. All right, so I'm getting painting, doing the light gray first. It is so much easier if you do one color across the board. Now I'm doing two colors across the board, which I think is also easy enough because I have a ton of things to paint, but it's just kind of like an assembly line and you can get things done. Now, why I like this is because I know that one set is going to be of a lighter finish and one set is going to be a darker finish. So that still gives me variety on the end result, but it helps me along the way because I know that all of these are done. It's done quickly. I don't have to keep opening paint. Nothing is getting mixed up. It's just all kind of easy peasy. So that's why I'm doing it this route. I know some people just do like a one color and done, and that's fine too. But like I said, I want to make sure that I have some with a darker undertone and some with a lighter undertone. And you know, these are kind of pretty colors, so I want to be able to use those. So, and then I will also let all of this dry overnight just because most of these surfaces are very slick. And I'm fine with the original finish showing through because I mean, I liked most of these anyways. But when you're going to be doing multiple layers of paint, it's going to reactivate the paint. So if it has a longer dry time, that means that you can get away with more on top of it without reactivating it too much and having it come off or shift or move. So base layer on, and then most of it was left overnight before I started on anything else. Now for this set of frames here, because it had all the detailing in it, I'm going to do a quick wash, and I didn't want it to be super stark because I wanted the finish to be a little bit darker at the end. So instead of using white, I am using a lighter color, but it's kind of a blend of a brown and white. So that way it'll still pop, it'll still kind of fall into the details and everything, but it's not so bright as white would be. So I have it watered down. I'm using a small brush and I'm working in small sections so it's not sitting on the paint for too long. And then I'm just wiping it back with a cloth. And now I'm going straight in with my Pebble Beach, which is a very soft, kind of like white khaki. And I'm just dry brushing over the high points on the detailing, and that's making all of those pop just a little bit more. So every time I add a layer and a color, I feel like it just gets better and better, especially when it's detailed stuff like this, where just the piece itself is kind of awesome. But now you can really see all the details that it has, whereas before they were kind of lost in just the black paint that it had. And a lot of times I have no idea what I'm doing. I just kind of start painting and see what happens. So this seems a little bit weird, but I have the Goblin Gray underneath, and then I'm taking this, it's kind of like a mid-tone khaki color, and I went over the top of it. I didn't make sure I fully covered all of the Goblin Gray because I wanted some of that peeking through. Again, I want to have like all these layers on here. And then I'm blending in some of the Goblin Gray into the corners just to add depth around those. And those are actually like a really smooth blend. And you guys know how I do my blends. It's wet paint with wet paint. If I have to add a little bit of water, I will. And then I'm subtly, this isn't actually dry brushing because all the paint is wet. I want it to kind of meld in, but that's kind of where I was going with that. And then for this little frame, I'm just hitting all the high points of the decor that is in it. And then I decided it was still pretty boring, so I added a bright blue. Yeah, I added a lot more colors than necessary. But I just think it's fun when you're looking at a piece and it's not just this two-tone something. Like when you really look at it, you can see all these other things kind of popping through, and I think it's so interesting. And this little guy turned out to be one of my most favorite pieces. It's just such a tiny little frame, but it's lovely. I just used the Pebble Beach to dry brush the high points just to make those stand out. And I knew that I wanted this one to go a little bit deep, so I didn't do anything in the recesses because we'll do that part later. And then I'm trying to work with kind of one product at a time. So as I'm going, I'm trying to get as many done in that scenario as I can. So I'm working through doing all the dry brushing and things like that, everything that's going that route. And then once I'm finished with that stuff, I'll switch over to something else and decide what I'm going to do with that. So this frame here was done light, and then I'm going in with just a very soft tealy oceany blue, and I'm dry brushing that color onto this frame because it was the frame that I didn't really want to paint, but because it had that the yellowing happening, it was just making me sad. So I ended up painting it, but in the same kind of color tones that it already was because I already liked it. And then when I'm dry brushing, there's a ton of different ways to do this, but this was a very shallow embossing that it had. So a lot of the times I would lay the brush super flat so that it wouldn't hit any other part of the frame. And on the bottom, I had to actually fix that part because I let the brush tilt up a little too high, so I ended up repainting that later. And then a lot of these just got the kind of stone look, and my other owl that sold was just this. This gray is a little bit lighter than I would typically use for this, but I think it still turned out really nice. So it's literally just the gray paint with white wax on it. You get it on there and then wipe it back, and the white sits into the recesses. The full piece is sealed and ready to go, and it's just awesome. Now for this guy, I ended up adding a little bit of gold gilding wax around his eyes. That's also what I did with the other one. And I think it's just like that little something extra that it gets without being too much. But yeah, I think gray paint with white wax is a sure win. Like, it's such a lovely combination. Okay, now I'm switching over to dark wax for several pieces. So this little frame here got the dark wax, and then it is going to sit down in the recesses. Since I wanted this to be deepened up, I went in straight with dark wax. If you don't want it to be this dark and you just want things to sit in the recesses, do clear wax first and then dark wax, because then you'll have a little more movement with it and you'll be able to remove more if you want to do that. But I wanted this piece to be dark, so I went in straight with the dark wax. And same with this frame. That's what I love about this Goblin Gray. It can kind of shift a lot of different ways. I mean, most colors can shift a lot of different ways. This is just one of my favorite colors, so I'm just in love with it. But I love how rich it gets when you add the dark wax. This is a dark brown wax. This is not black wax. I prefer dark brown just because I think it is a little bit softer but still gives the deep results. And then I've got gold gilding wax out and I'm just running that over. I feel like gold is just an easy color to do, and the way that I'm doing this is I'm not doing a ton, and I'm doing it while the black wax and the other waxes are still a little wet. So it's not going on very strong. It's kind of a subtle, like you can see it there, but it's not too much. And I'm making sure that I skip over certain areas so that it doesn't look brand new. Like I don't want any of these pieces to look brand new. I want them to look kind of lived in. This part was a mistake. So this frame in particular, I should have just gone fully light with it. Once I was done with the dark wax on it, I just was not happy. So I ended up changing it just a little bit at the end, but if I were to do this again, I would not have done the dark wax on this frame. It did not make me pleased when I was finished, which is a shame, but it's fine. That's what happens. I was like, it'll be fine. I'll fix it with copper gilding wax. Did not fix. I just did not love this end result. It was just too bleh. So I have my rag out, and then I have dark wax, clear wax, and white wax. I'm using the same brush with all three of these, which typically you wouldn't do. However, I use my clear wax and that rag to clean it off in between switching colors out. So I try not to switch colors too much, but you can do that if you need to. So now that I have the paint on the frames, I will actually go in and I can scrape the paint off the glass. That's really easy. If you get wax on the glass, that is a bigger pain. So that's why I'm not waxing up this frame with the glass still in it, because it is difficult to get wax off. But paint, you can just scrape it right off, and it's super, super simple. These frames here did the light gray, the white wax, and the gold, and those were the ones that I was keeping, those two larger wooden frames. And then this frame, of course, was just sealed in clear wax because I wanted it to stay bright and light. And as I said, with these ones, they also got a little bit of gilding, and it was the same thing where I made sure the white wax was still wet and applied the gilding that way. That way it wasn't super, super strong going on, and it's just kind of a hint where the light hits it sometimes. And again, since I was already using the gold, I was just going through and adding it to all the pieces that were ready for gold to happen. And very lightly, randomly, not over every raised inch of the surface. Now, this one I loved, and I was very excited about doing it because it just has so much going on with it. And then it took me a second to be like, okay, where am I actually going to go with this? So the outside is just the gray white wax combination. And then I was like, oh, that's just not enough. So I fancied up the inside because, well, why not? So all I did was take the very soft blue color that I had out, and I did stripes on the inside coming up. And then this gold wax in particular that I have is a water-based, so you can add water to your brush and thin it out to be able to draw really, really smooth lines with it. So that's what I did. I did blue stripes on either side of the blue stripe. I would add like a pinstripe of gold, and then it just kind of went back and forth. And so I feel like it was just something fun on the inside of this you know, the outside is a little fancy and the inside is a little more funky. So then I'm going through with all the ones that I want to be kind of the really layered with different colors look. So I've got the light grays, and then I'll do layers of blue, and then I've got layers of browns that will come in there, and just kind of back and forth with all of these things. And I'm not worried about full coverage. I'm just kind of slapping it on to get it on so that it can start drying, so that we can do other colors everywhere. So when I'm setting up at the markets and everything, I'll put a lot of these colors and these styles that are similar together. That way, if somebody sees that they all kind of go together, they can get them all at once, or just do individual pieces, which is fine too. But I kind of like the look of that when you have like that stack setup of very similar colored things. Anyways, this vase was super fun to do because there were so many different, like, there's so much movement in it. It was really cool to kind of let the brush fall into those areas and kind of do what it wanted. So this one here is getting more of a, I'm not even going to say it's a wash because the paint wasn't thinned out. I did full strength paint and then wiped it back immediately. So that color is sitting down in the recesses, but it was not wet or anything. It was just regular paint I threw on and wiped it back. And then I went in with that, like, it's almost a chocolate color, that medium khaki color, and I just hit kind of all the high points with it. This was very dry brushy, and so it wasn't perfect. I wasn't trying to make sure I hit everything. I just wanted to make sure that I got on there and did all the higher points on it, and then I'll do the same thing with gold. But when I did the gold, again, I was using it a little wet, so it was going on very, very thin, and I could kind of make it look like a dry brush. And these little tea light candle holders, I didn't know what to do with them after I painted them. I was like, oh, there's not a lot of detail to these, but I actually really like how they ended up. So just layers and layers and layers. Now the big frame had been done in Goblin Gray, and I just went straight in with the dark wax because it had that darker matte on the inside, so I had to get the Goblin Gray to tone with it. Had I used the clear wax, it wouldn't have been as dark as I wanted it to, so I just went through and did all of that and then wiped it back, and then of course that seals it and lets it all sit in the recesses. And then I took a tiny bit of gold, not everywhere, just on kind of the details of it. Again, the wax is still wet, so this isn't going on full strength, it's just subtle, and it is so much better than that crazy gold that it was before. And you can really see the painting now, because before all you could see was that gold frame, and now it's like, okay, the frame almost blends in with the matte, and then you get to see all the colors that are in the center of the image, and it is so lovely. I may want to hang this one up in the guest house because I love it so much. And for this little tile, like I said, I want a ton of different layers on this, so I'm adding a bit of gold everywhere, not just the high points, just kind of sporadically, because it's going to be covered. But I want some of the gold that was originally on it, that kind of deeper, more metallic gold, and then also a little bit of the gilding gold, which is a different color. And so we're getting tons of different things happening. And then I can add more things, and this is actually a wash that I did to it just to add more stuff, but I'm not wiping it back. I'm kind of dabbing it back to give a little bit of texture, but not too much color. And then I'll get some drips in it as well. So this thing was just kind of a free-for-all. Like I said, I just wanted with this to mess around with it and play with it. But I'm actually really pleased with how it turned out. So yeah, it was interesting just to kind of keep adding colors where I wanted them to, and then you could kind of do the spray bottle and let everything run down. You could remove stuff with a rag if you needed to. It was just a fun thing. And I really liked the way it turned out. And then while it was still wet, you can see me with the rag kind of scrubbing pretty hard. I'm letting some of the underneath come through so that it's sticking out. So it just looks more layering. And since I was liking the tones of the other things with these colors, I went ahead and continued it on with the vase. And I wanted it to look, you can see it looks almost like a glaze. How when they do the pottery glazes, they're heavier in some spots and lighter in other spots. So that's literally just brushing the paint on in kind of just spots, not everywhere, at the top. And then I would spray it down. And I'd use the brush to kind of help it out a little to move around. And you can see me using my fingers as well, just kind of getting it where I want it. So I'm doing heavier at the top and heavier at the bottom, and then the middle still kind of leaving more of that blue showing through. And it's fun watching it. Like I said, there's so much movement in this vase itself that when you'd spray the water and put the paint on, it would kind of go wherever it wanted to go because of the shape of the vase. So I just thought this was really cool. While I was waiting for that to dry, I just went in with the very wet gilding wax and a detail brush and went over all the high points on this little cup here. I just thought this one turned out so pretty. So like I said, this one is fun because you can use it more dry, where when you're putting it on, it feels like a regular gilding wax. And it will do kind of the skipping old world, kind of not perfect finish. And then if you get your brush a little bit wet, it will help it glide, and you can use it to actually like do really smooth lines with it. So that was really cool. So you can kind of see what it was doing right here. I'll flip it over so you can see in the camera. Now, as I said, this frame should have been done, but I hated it. So I went in with some of that really soft, light, bright blue and hit that on all the high points just as a dry brushing, and I was a lot happier with it that way because I felt like it wasn't as dark. It brightened it up a bit. Again, if I had this one to do over, I definitely would. But it is what it is, and I probably just wouldn't do that combination on something similar in the future. And just adding more gilding wax to this piece. Again, it was very sporadic. I'm kind of dry brushing it on there so that it's not everywhere and not super in your face, just a nice, subtle, random placement. And then this one got sealed with dark wax. This one could have gone either way. I think it would have looked lovely with white wax. I don't think clear wax would have been perfect just because there's so much detail in this. But I think the dark wax would have been, well, it was good, or white wax would have been cool. Or a gray, or, you know, any other colored wax. Yeah, these ones just, they had me stumped because there was nothing sticking out. They had texture to them, but I don't know. So I ended up just doing washes of this really, really bright blue and then wiped it back some and made it do the drippy thing. And I ended up really liking these, but man, I didn't know what to do with them. So I kind of just did, and you know, whatever happens, happens type thing. But I knew that wouldn't be the outside color. I knew it was going to be a color underneath another color, but I wanted it to be there. Yeah, I don't know. But I was really, really liking this, applying paint in one spot and then spraying it and letting it kind of do whatever it wanted to do. I thought that was really fun and a really cool technique. Now we're going back to this bottle, and I'm going back and forth between kind of dry brushing and then having it not be so dry, like going on full kind of blobbiness with the paint. So initially I'm going this route, and then like I said, this is just to build up layers and to have a bunch of colors on this. Now they're all very similar in like how deep they are. So I've got a soft blue and kind of that soft beigey color, and then I'll have some of the Pebble Beach on there, which is a very like, I'm going to say it's like a dark creamy white. But so I'm just doing all of these colors and letting them kind of live together, and it looks so pretty. I'm sure you can see I use my lids a lot. Like I'm color mixing. I'm not just going in with the specific colors if they're not exactly what I want. I'm not afraid to get the lids dirty and to mesh up colors. And then for this last part, you can see I have quite a few of them kind of mixed up in the lids, and I'm kind of dabbing them on with the brush and getting them everywhere. Where I get too hard in some spots, I can soften it up with another color and just kind of going every which way with the brush. No rhyme or reason, just all over wherever it's making me happy. I do think this finish takes a bit longer than the others, where if you're just doing obviously the gray paint with the white wax, but man, it's so pretty, and I think it's totally worth it to have these kind of things in there. And this could go really, really dark or super light. You can do it with obviously a ton of different colors, but I mean, imagine this in like blacks and browns and maybe throw like a purple in there or something, and it wouldn't look like any of those things. I think that'd be really pretty. Now you can see me cleaning off my wax brush because I had dark wax on it, but I'm going in with white wax now, and that's what we're going to seal this little cup with. I'm doing it over the top of my gold gilding. If you want your gold gilding to be very strong, you'll want to do that after you wax. This will remove some of the gilding, and that's totally fine with me. Like I said, I want these to look kind of old, not freshly painted. But you do whatever you want. And I thought I'd share this part because I find stuff like this interesting. So I go through and write everything down, and then as I'm researching, I will go through and price it all out. So I figure out what a reasonable price would be, and then where it falls into my price points, and kind of go from there. And then I weigh everything out and get it all put on the website. And then my website, of course, does markets and stuff too. So it's really great for that. And then of course we're back at it. Yeah, like I said, this one got tons and tons of layers, so super fun. This actually did a really interesting thing because it was so slippery that when I got it wet with the second round of paint, it almost crackled. So it had like the look of crackle, but it didn't crack through. It just almost like let the paint wrinkle up a bit. I don't know, it looked so cool. So I was really, really pleased with how this one came out because it was just so interesting. And again, I started with dry brushing, and then I went through and did kind of dabs and blobs, and kind of, it's with a very, very dry brush, but I am going on and adding a ton of different texture and moving the brush around in different ways so that you don't have the same pattern repeating, so that it's kind of more organic, random. And again, just adding more layers to this guy because he needs them, obviously. So many layers. And they're not perfect. Like, I'm not trying to make sure I get every single area, every single thing. It's just kind of letting it happen. And for the finish, I decided on just kind of dry brushing over the crazy texture that these things had. And I think they turned out pretty cool. Back in with our gold. So I know it seems like I jump around back and forth from a lot of products, but it's because I'll have multiple things in one step and then multiple things in another step. So I'll do several in one thing while those ones are drying. They're kind of batched out so that, because these ones had tons and tons of layers on them, so they had to have more dry time in between each layer. So while those were drying, I'd be able to add gilding to another round of things, and while those ones were drying, I'd be able to add wax to those things. So it was kind of nice to have all those stages so that nothing was really ever waiting. Like, I wasn't waiting on anything. I always had something to do. And again, I've got the gold on here first, so it's going to be taken back once I do the white wax to seal them, or any wax. So it's on there, and then I'm using, like I said, white wax, and it will take back some of the gold that I have on there. So I didn't put a lot on anyways, but now it's going to also remove some with the white wax that's going on. I will say using this small brush for waxing was a huge help, because I mean, this had so many details. Most of the small things had a lot of details, and I can imagine trying to get one of my large wax brushes in there. So yeah, this was just, it was really great having that teeny tiny, and I know it looks small, but I mean, it worked pretty quick. And this guy got clear wax because he was already fairly light, and I didn't want to add more white to kind of soften it out more when it already had so much. So clear wax for this guy. If you're wondering what is in my clear wax container, I keep 4/0 steel wool in there so that I always have it on hand. It's what I do the tops of my furniture with to give them extra protection. So I thought I'd share this. Usually I do the tie-on tags with string because I like them, but a lot of these don't have spots for tie-on. So I printed out teeny weeny tiny price tag stickers, and then I could kind of hide them on the piece.
Oh hi, Taryn here with Elegant Upgrades, and we've got our finished pieces. Well, some of them anyways. I brought in the small ones because this is kind of the setup where I photograph everything for the website. So I had these here. I hope you guys like this. I know this is quite a bit different than my typical thing, but right now I'm getting ready to pack all this up, load it in the trailer, and we've got to go set it up for the market. So that's why we're doing this. Again, it's just what's happening in the business right now, so it's kind of what I have to share. Hope you enjoyed. If you learned something, or not at all, because really I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just hoping for the best. And since smalls did so well at the last one, like, I have to replenish, and so this is where we're at. You guys have an amazing day, week, month, all the things. Thank you for following along on this kind of veer off. But yeah, all right, I will see you guys next time.